My pleasure. So, as I said before, we're going to give a little bit more information right now. But Shanna was born and raised in the Jehovah's Witness cult, although she was very devout for the first 28 years. She was disfellowshipped, excommunicated, that means, in 2000 for not following their strict rules regarding sex. However, she continued to believe it was the one true religion. I'm really interested in finding about that. And it was just a matter of time before she would be killed in Armageddon. Also, I've heard people call on the helpline with just that problem. Early in 2017, she finally woke up mentally. And as she progressed through her deconstruction process, she explored secular groups. She found RfR and has been volunteering with us since 2017. She currently volunteers for RfR as a volunteer coordinator, board secretary, and support group host in person and a co-host virtual. She's a real slacker, doesn't do anything. In addition, she's a secretary, treasurer, membership co-chair for Jefferson Humanist, and runs an ExJW meetup out of her home once a month. I don't know how you find the time for all these things. In May of this year, she was elected to the board of directors of the Secular Hub and assists with events planning in that organization too. If she's not volunteering for one of these organizations, she's taking her dog Cash on hikes. Wow.
Welcome, Shana. I don't know how you made time to even be here tonight with all that going on, but
Wow.
we are so glad you
I feel like
did.
such a slacker.
Well, I don't have a full-time job, so
Neither
maybe
do
that's
I.
why. Okay. I don't know what to say then.
I wish I didn't. That's not true. I need the money. Well, we are glad that you are devoting probably more time than you would to a full-time job to doing all of these awesome things. So thank you for that. And thank you for joining us. I am so excited for this talk. I cannot wait to learn about your experiences. And I know we have several people already in the chat saying they are either former JWs or are still partially in. I'm seeing a lot of acronyms coming in the chat that I know we've talked about before about people who are maybe physically in but mentally out. I think I'm saying that right, or vice versa. Yeah.
I've also had several calls just in the last week where some of them were JWs stepping out, and other ones were from other high control religions. And I still thought this would be a great talk, so I recommended that they join us tonight. I hope they're here.
Thank you.
Well, do you want to go ahead and start sharing? I know you have a presentation prepared. Did you want to jump straight into that, or do you want to tell us a little bit? Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll answer the questions because there'll be a lot. My deconversion story is kind of woven in the presentation, but there'll be questions. So sure, I'll be happy to answer them.
Perfect. And we'll be collecting them. So just type them in the chat if you have a question. We'll try and collect them all.
And by the plural, we'll be, you really mean you, because you're just too fast for me to ever get one in.
Sometimes you get one before me. If I'm not paying attention.
One out of 25, maybe.
You got to have one thing I'm good at. All right, Shana, go ahead.
Okay. So back in June, Helen put a request on Facebook for volunteers to present at RfRx. And I told her that I could do one. And the next day I was having this discussion with my husband about what I should focus on. Should I talk about the deconstruction process? Should I talk about JW beliefs? And he said, well, why don't you just ask them what they like to hear? You know, what is received well? And so she told me the next day that deconversion stories, purity culture, and sexuality topics are well received. And I thought, crap, I hate talking about sex. But the more I thought about it, I thought I better really look at that, because I am positive I'm not the only one who feels that way. And I'm not the only one who shies away from it because of the messages that I received from my parents and from the cult around my body and sex and indoctrination from the witnesses, how it impacted my life. And so I feel like if we can be vulnerable to to lots of people right now, um, we'll all see that we're not alone, and we'll feel more empowered. And especially talking about taboo topics can bring it out in the open, and it will dispel the shame that we were surrounded with. Um, but let me preface this by saying that I'm not a professional. I haven't written a book about it. I'm not an academic. I didn't even go to college. But what I am is an expert in indoctrination in the JW cult and the damage it can cause to your sexuality and to other parts of your life. So I have been since about 2017 in this journey of healing. And I'm going to talk about some really uncomfortable topics, and I might even blush a few times. But there's only way to move past it is by being vulnerable. And so one of the goals that I have tonight is to normalize these completely natural parts of life that should never have caused us any shame. And I also have another disclaimer. I'm a cishet female, so this talk is going to be from that perspective. And there is going to be talk of rape, but I have a little tag in my notes to remind me to put out a trigger warning, so that it's just like 3 or 4 slides. But I want for people to do self-care if that is a trigger for you. And then I think they'll put in the chat that we're going to be talking about this, and then they'll say when we're finished. And if you are a former Jehovah's Witness, this entire talk will be very triggering to you, but I encourage you to stick it out, because I think that I have a lot of things to say that you will relate to, and I think it will in the end be helpful to you. But it's up to you. I don't want to force anybody to do anything. All right, next slide. So the official teaching is that Jehovah's Holy Spirit is actively directed by the governing body. So these 12 men, and you'll notice that this is from January 1992. I was born in 73. So these men were very actively part of deciding what parts of my body I could touch, what clothes I could wear, who I was allowed to associate with, who I was allowed to have sex with, what sexual activities I was allowed to have, even in marriage, and who I was allowed to marry, when I was allowed to divorce, and if I was sexually assaulted, who would be blamed. There's a whole bunch of other things that you're going to hear about tonight. And I want to spend the next few slides just giving an overview of what witnesses are taught. There's hundreds of restrictions that we had to abide by, but I just chose 20, either based on how ridiculous they were or something that really impacted my life. So I'm also going to talk about some other things a lot more in detail, like masturbation and dating and marriage and things like that. But this is just a quick overview. So many of you know that we were considered no part of this world, so we couldn't associate with anybody who wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. We could never get involved in politics, join the armed forces, or take a stand on any political issue. We couldn't even discuss politics. I didn't even register to vote until 2016. And I didn't even know where I stood on politics, because I was taught to avoid it so much. I had to take a test online to figure out what am I, where are my leanings. No practicing of yoga, not even wearing yoga pants. One of the governing body members calls them Spanx and says that you're not allowed to wear them in public. You can wear them at home around your husband. That's almost an exact quote. And then we're very well known for not accepting blood transfusions, and that includes, of course, we can't donate blood. Next slide. Some other things that we weren't allowed to do is buy secondhand things. Some people did, because witnesses are generally very poor, because we weren't allowed to go to college. But there was strong warnings about it, because they could be demon possessed, and you wouldn't know it until you brought it into your house. We couldn't engage in any kind of extracurricular activities in the school, play competitive sports, no prom, no dances. We couldn't even toast. The first time I did a toast. It was, I like broke out into a cold sweat. I was shaking. It was just such a disorienting feeling for just a toast. Of course, no gambling, and that includes buying a lottery ticket, and not even bingo. There was an actual talk about an entire talk that I listened to in the Spanish congregation about not going to bingo. Another thing that witnesses are very well known for is not celebrating Christmas, New Year's Eve, Mother's Day, Father's Day, birthdays, Thanksgiving, Veterans Day, Independence Day, Memorial Day, St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's Day, Halloween. Nothing. Nothing is celebrated except for baby showers, weddings, and wedding anniversaries. And the biggest celebration of the year is the death of Jesus Christ, which was a totally morose affair called the memorial. It's ridiculous. I'll tell you more about it later. And then there's practically no dancing, no rated R movies. Men can't have long hair, and body piercings and tattoos are strongly discouraged. Women are allowed to have just one discrete earlobe piercing in each ear, just one. Another thing that witnesses aren't allowed to do is talk negatively about the organization, attend university, can't believe in any modern day miracles, only the ones that are talked about in the Bible. You can't even wish somebody good luck because it is professing belief in the God of luck. And couldn't own firearms or learn any kind of martial arts or boxing. And definitely you couldn't profess a hope in going to heaven unless you were of the heavenly class, which is supposedly only 144,000. Everybody else is in the earthly class, which is supposed to inherit a paradise earth. And there was no loving anybody or anything more than Jehovah. And women are very subjugated, like many high control groups. They can't address the audience from the stage. They can look at each other or look at a brother that is interviewing them, but they're never allowed to face the audience. And of course, they can't run the microphones, they can't run the sound system, but they are allowed to play the piano. That's the one thing they get to do if they know how to do that, and if they still have a piano in the Kingdom Hall. Then there's no talking to anybody who's disfellowshipped, and no keeping secrets from the organization. You are mandated to report on anybody who breaks the rules. Okay, fun subject. Actually, I kind of do think it's kind of a fun subject. So the first restriction is masturbation that I want to focus on tonight. My earliest memory about this, I was like 7 or 8, and my mom used to always buy ivory soap, bar pure ivory soap, which is incredibly drying. And then I live in Colorado, which has an incredibly dry climate. And so it would really make my vulva area very itchy and dry. And so one night when my dad came in to tuck me in, I was itching, scratching myself under the covers, and he wrongly thought that I was playing with myself. So he got really serious and he said, "Never touch yourself there." And he didn't explain anything further. And by how serious he got, I felt like I can't even ask any questions. So I was so mortified. I never once touched my vulva except for with a barrier like a washcloth or toilet paper or something like that until I was about 13 when I tried to insert a tampon very unsuccessfully to go swimming when I had my period. So there are some myths there. I'm just focusing on 4, but there's all kinds of myths that they have. They teach about masturbation and homosexuality because those two things in their mind go together. And their feeling is that it doesn't really cause that much physical harm, but it does cause spiritual harm because the Bible says that you should deaden and not excite certain body members. So this one is an answer to a question that was posed to the governing body about whether it's better to release the tension, the sexual tension that gets pent up in both sexes. And their answer, because they're experts, was that no, it does not help at all. It does not release tension. It instead throws your whole nervous system into a high state of excitement. And then afterward, you feel nervous and frustrated and dissatisfied. And it doesn't give any genuine satisfaction. Now, like I mentioned before, I don't have any degrees, especially not in the sciences, the human sciences, neuroendocrinology, human sexuality. But I know for sure, personally, this is not true. This is like one of the most pleasurable activities that a human being can can engage in. I looked up what Planned Parenthood's take is on masturbation, and they say that it can lower your stress, it can help you relax, it even helps some people fall asleep. And because orgasms release endorphins, then it can even be a natural painkiller, which could alleviate period cramps. Another myth is that you have to repress the urge. These are just like the most ridiculous measures. I have no idea what they were thinking when they came up with these stupid ideas, but it basically just delays the inevitable because you're going to masturbate. It's not going to stop it from happening. And I really feel like when I was reading through this, I felt like they're so ignorant about human physiology and reality and just like life itself. It doesn't make any sense. And there's a lot of things that we're going to go over tonight that just don't make any sense. But it still didn't stop them from teaching 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses that a completely normal, healthy activity is unclean, indecent, unnatural, and shameful. So the biggest humdinger of them all, it leads to homosexuality. So all of us who are heterosexuals, it's just a matter of time. We're all gonna turn gay. So I looked this up to see what some other people, because this is not an uncommon thought. Not only Jehovah's Witnesses believe this, there's a lot of high control groups that believe this. And so I went on Quora, and there was a question that said, can you turn gay from excessive masturbation? And I love one of the answers. It says, you cannot turn gay from anything. I love that. Okay, so if you really want to watch some really horribly cringy specifics about what the governing body feels about masturbation and homosexuality, I would highly recommend this video. It's fairly short. I think it's only like 45 minutes long, and it shows the two governing body members explaining what the rules are for people who enter what's called Bethel, which is the headquarters of the witnesses, where it's a great what's the word? It's a great honor to be invited to Bethel, and it's mainly men, and they're responsible for writing the publications and they just have a lot of responsibilities. Not quite so much now, but it was like if you mentioned a Bethelite, everybody was like, ooh, he's a Bethelite. but oh my God, I can't believe some of the things that they talk about. The men's video is like an hour long, and for the females that enter Bethel, it's like maybe 20 minutes. So it's strangely specific about the things that you should and shouldn't engage in. One thing that I thought about when I was writing for this presentation is that, considering how deplorable the the witnesses and the governing body think that masturbation is, it's not a disfellowshipping offense by itself. And you can probably guess why that is, because they quickly run out of witnesses if they actually disfellowshipped all of them that told on themselves and um, went and told the elders that they are addicted to masturbating. But you can have a lighter sentence, which is kind of like losing your privileges. You can't say a prayer in public or give a talk. You can't comment at meetings. You can't, if you're there, they have a couple of tiers of people who, it's kind of hard to apply to other religions, but they have like what they call elders, which would maybe be like priests or preachers. And then they have like their helpers, which are called ministerial servants. Anyway, you couldn't be one of those if you were, if you told on yourself and said that you were masturbating and or viewing pornography. In fact, my brother, I have a brother who's 5 years younger than me. He went and confessed, and he was reproved, but that was all. And he was quickly reinstated, since they really need brothers. They're the only ones that are running the organization, they think. Anyway, that's a different subject. So I was on this ExJW forum, and I thought this was really interesting. Somebody said it's not a moral thing, it's a practical thing. So they do draw the line, like, yeah, it's wrong and everything, but we're not going to kick you out because we're not going to have anybody. All right, so a little bit different subject. So these 12 men thinks it's really, really important to dictate what you get to wear, how it fits, how much it covers or doesn't cover, and especially how as men think of how women and men dress. This this picture was lifted from one of their publications, and I think in itself it's very telling. Just make up your own opinions about what you see. Um, so,
And for people who are listening,
oh,
can we
sorry.
describe what we're
Yeah, so
seeing here?
there's a picture of it, and all four are of women. One is a girl wearing a spaghetti strapped tank top, and she's showing just a teeny tiny little bit of a midriff, which big no. And then there's somebody else with a long sleeve collared shirt on, and she's busting out of it, and it looks great. And then there's somebody else that's their version of a plunging neckline, which I you can't see anything, and the skirt is like maybe an inch above the knee. Can't have that. And then there's the fourth one is somebody who's wearing a long skirt, but it has a slit that goes like mid thigh. So none of these things are acceptable because they're tight fitting, they're revealing, they're sexually provocative. And, and I guess some people are forced to look the other way. I, I I'm not.
Who's
um,
forcing them?
yeah, exactly. So there was a big, I don't know what you call it. We were making fun of one of the governing body members as ExJW's because he had this whole tirade about men wearing tight pants, because he says that men, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, men who are making these clothes, who are designing these clothes, are all homosexuals, and they want you in those tight pants because it's sexually provocative to them. I don't, there's so many things to say about that.
I'm so
But anyway,
confused by that.
I know.
I have so many questions.
So the governing body member is Tony Morris, and so we started calling him Tight Pants Tony. And then there's all kinds of memes on the internet showing, like his head placed on this guy with incredibly tight pants on. It's great. Um, let's see, have I covered everything? So when I left the religion, I still struggle with this because of my mom, but that's a different subject. I don't really feel like it's anyone's business what I put on my body. I think most of us think my body, my choice when it comes to selecting apparel. So this is just terribly invasive. Um, okay, so when I was about 15, that was my first introduction to I am responsible for men's sexual arousal. I was at one of my friends' houses. She was about 20 years old. We were getting ready to go to a water themed amusement park, and I was trying on one of her swimsuits. And there was a few people that were over there visiting for whatever reason from the congregation. And so when I came out of the bathroom, I was like, come over here, look, tell me what you think. And I was in this really dark hallway, and I knew that there were people in the living room. So obviously I wasn't going to go and do a little twirl because I don't want to make a spectacle of myself, because that's not, a chaste young lady's um, actions that should be seen. But anyway, there was this one brother in the congregation that was around my parents' age, and he saw just like a tiny little corner of me coming out of the bathroom when I was talking to my friend, and he gets up and like comes around the corner to look at me, and I was like, can I help you? And then later on, when we're all getting ready to leave, he he tells me that was incredibly inappropriate, that he was aroused. He didn't use any other words. And he asked me if I did it on purpose and if I was also aroused. So of course I didn't know any different. So I was just like mortified that I did this to him. So it took a long time for me to get over that. So this is just some examples of the shame that I was taught around my body and how I'm responsible for men's feelings about what I wear or don't wear or what it covers or doesn't cover. Okay, there's a trigger warning now. I'm going to start talking about rape. So if this is something that you don't want to hear, now's the time to leave the room or put it on mute. So the last slide talked about arousing sexual desire in men, whether it's intended or not, and how what your clothing and actions, how they're interpreted by males, and that you should think about the way you dress because of the way men will view it. This was a answer to a question in a watchtower from 1964. And I don't know where they got this Seattle, Washington police official, but they wrote, I guess, a direct quote of what he said. And I have some information here for those of you who are not seeing it. I'll quickly read through it, and I want you to pay real close attention to the end. He says, our whole moral climate, our attitudes towards sex and the dress of the women have to be the causes of, and it's rape in parentheses, in view of the way that many men think. Each virtuous woman should be careful to dress modestly. Women who reveal everything in the way they dress make themselves more vulnerable to rape. Now, this is the part that it just turns my stomach. You can't advertise a commodity and expect no buyers. A little modesty, he holds, would prevent some rapes. And so after I read this, I went down this whole rabbit hole about the the things that the witnesses taught about rape victims. So for almost 30 years, the governing body consistently told women who were sexually assaulted that they were at least partially responsible because of the way they dressed. The victim blaming didn't stop until 1993, when an Awake article stated that the victim of rape does not bear any responsibility for the crime committed against her. And I want to note, those of you who are still listening, that when I say a victim, I'm using the governing body's words. Those aren't mine. Because we call them survivors. So I want to leave us from this subject, not talking about the horrendous things that the governing body printed in their materials and disseminated to, I'm sure, hundreds and hundreds of rape survivors. And I'd rather focus on this exhibit because all of us probably, maybe, have maybe some holdovers from some beliefs in maybe the past that women's, whatever a woman is wearing determines their consent. And I did, this is actually a very large exhibit in many cities. And I just lifted a couple of the pictures. There were actually a few that were of like little girl outfit. And I couldn't bring myself to do that because there's stories that are attached to each one of these pictures of clothing. So anyway, the point is, fuck Jehovah's Witnesses and their beliefs about rape. They have really hurt so many people. Not only the survivors, but the people around them. Okay, I'm done. I can't talk about this anymore. Um, so you can come back in the room. You can start watching again. You can put the volume back up. I don't want to end this section talking about sexual assault because I started it talking about the appropriate clothing. This is actually fairly recent. I know it's like 11 years old, but I lifted it off their website. And this is supposed to be a picture of people enjoying themselves on the beach. And I'll describe what people are seeing in just a second. So there's probably like a half a dozen people on a beach, and they are all wearing either long pants or a long skirt. The men are wearing button-up collared shirts, and I'm really surprised that they like allowed them to be photographed with like naked feet and shirts untucked, because it's not showing anything that they think they're showing. This does not look fun. This looks like really hot and restricting. Like you can't move very well. Anyway, on to the next subject: adolescence and sex. In the introduction, I was a very devout witness. I begged to be baptized when I was 11, and at the time they were not accepting people, young children, being baptized. They think that's too similar to Catholicism. However, they have really loosened their rules because the attrition is horrible, and so you're finding like 8 and 9 year olds getting baptized. But this was like back in the early 80s. So I was 100% certain at the ripe old age of 11 that this is the way I wanted to spend the rest of my life, and nothing was going to stop me. And they told me that I couldn't get baptized at 11. I was too young, which I burst into tears, and I just sat there sobbing while my dad was like trying to convince them that I really should be baptized, but they didn't budge. But then the next year, somehow 1 year difference it makes, I was allowed to get baptized, which was like the most incredible moment in all 12 years of my life. And then puberty kicked in. So I was looking for non-Jehovah's Witness information about adolescence and sexuality and what's healthy and normal. And so I found a study that said that adolescence is an intermediate stage of human development between the ages of 10 and 19 that's characterized by remarkable biological and psychological changes. During this phase, an individual first faces sexuality, a basic need and central aspect of human beings. Sexuality is intimately related to physical and mental health, and it influences thoughts, feelings, actions, and interactions that are related to sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, eroticism, pleasure, intimacy, and reproduction. So my adolescence could have been, as this is described, like really great and pleasurable, but it wasn't. This is just like straight from Wikipedia. It's I'll read some of it to those who can't see it. So the biological approach views sexual drives as similar to other physical drives, such as hunger. And a person will seek out food, or in the case of desire, pleasure, in order to avoid pain. And a sex drive is a biological need. It is strongly tied to many biological factors like chromosomal and hormonal status, nutrition, age, general health, things that a person has absolutely zero control over. So my adolescence was like this whirlwind of confusion because I had a really strong sex drive. I really wanted to satisfy my biological needs, but it was completely unacceptable, especially for a girl, a teenage girl. So all of my natural curiosity was completely drowned out in a pool of shame. So as a result, my adolescence was completely devoid of any kind of sexual instruction. Okay, so what people are seeing now is the internal and the external reproductive system, and this is very clinical. It's like something that you could get from any kind of, well, it is the Cleveland Clinic of 2022. So this is similar to what was shown on the overhead projector. The problem is that from that early traumatization of my dad telling me never to touch myself there, and then the witnesses teaching about women being inherently unclean, I was so ashamed of my body. Most of us who are in possession of a uterus understand that it's not so simple to look at ourselves between our legs. I mean, it requires, like, in many cases, a flashlight and a mirror, and if you've got a mirror, even better, because that part of our real estate it's hard to view. Anyway, I this would have been a view of it, but I couldn't even look at the overhead projector because I was so ashamed. It was as if they were showing my internal organs and my external organs. And all I could do is stare at the floor, and my face was burnt. I still remember the feeling of the burning sensation in my face because I was so ashamed. And the teacher kept on saying the word labia, and I wish she would stop it. So that was like the most uncomfortable experience that I can remember in my junior high years. So it turned out to be a missed educational opportunity. And I came to regret it because it wasn't until 2018 when I was watching an animated adult series called Big Mouth. That's what's on the screen right now. It's from 2017 to 2025. And it's basically talking about teenagers and their hormones. Each one of the characters is assigned a hormone monster, and it's really cute and very truthful about different sex drives, how your hormones mess around with you when you're getting older. And some of the characters' parents are very open about sexuality. Some are way too open. I mean, it's not age appropriate, and some never talk about it. Some of the kids develop a lot, and some of them are a little bit delayed. It's just, it's great. But anyway, what I learned is that I have two holes in my vulva. I did not know that. I thought that my urine came out of the same hole that the penis goes in. And I did not discover that until I was almost half a century old. So, all of you people who own a cloud that magnify and figure out what you've got, because I cannot believe that I spent that long not knowing that. Okay, now onto slightly less making my face red. Um,
You're doing great, and we can't tell.
Really? Because I'm feeling the burning sensation.
Thank
All
you
right.
for
Okay.
sharing this,
That was the
because
hardest slide.
there are a lot of people that I think are relating to this. So thank you
I hope
for
so. I
doing
hope
that
so.
with us.
Yeah. I even had a friend that told me a few years before that. She says I was talking about putting in a tampon or something like that, and that it fell out when I would pee. And she says, "You don't pee out of the same hole. You know that, right?" And I'm like, "No." And like I didn't believe her. I was like, "Nah." Anyway,
Wait, how would you
so
know if you never had the opportunity to learn about it?
right, I don't see that. And I when I told my husband, he's like, "Well, yeah. Why did you know that?" I'm like, "Because I don't have the vantage point that you do."
Right.
So now, sex, dating, and marriage in the Jehovah's Witness organization. Now, I thought that this was an excellent description. I found this on Medium. It's written by an individual named Tassin Sanusi. I might be pronouncing her name wrong. But she said that dating as a young Jehovah's Witness is a less romantic version of Victorian courtship tradition. It's a delicate dance of cautious Puritanism. Puritanism. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. To make sure that nothing unclean happens during courtship, Jehovah's Witnesses are to be accompanied by a chaperone, ideally an older person in good standing within the congregation. Those within the religion are taught to police themselves and others on constant lookout for sinful behavior, even sinful thoughts. So by the time they're ready to start looking for a spouse, they're experts in monitoring one another. And the last sentence I thought was really impactful. It says, "I resented constantly feeling like an evil person just for being human." That is like the story of my life as a witness, especially as a teenager. So this gem of a book came out when I was about 16 years old. The book is called Questions Young People Ask, Answers That Work. And this book almost is responsible solely for fucking up my teenage years. This is a disastrous book. These are some of the things that are written in it about premarital sex. It's supposed quotes, which I don't believe that they are quotes at all, especially after having sex. It's not true. So they claim that if you do engage in premarital sex, you will be totally ashamed. You will, because of your lack of self control, it will cause feelings of guilt and diminished self respect. It causes low self confidence, low self esteem. It's a serious sin against God and your body. It will make you feel sick, cheap, and dirty, and it was bitterly disappointing. And it causes jealousy and mistrust. That's everything that will happen if you engage in premarital sex. And I know that this is common for a lot of religions, um, about sex before marriage. They try and make you believe that it's negative, um, that there's nothing good that can come from it. But as this little known author says, that there's no credible evidence that shows that premarital sex has any negative impact on sexuality, marriage, or parenting ability. In Europe, the vast majority of teens have sex when they decide they are ready, and the European civilization has not fallen apart. And that's a direct quote from Sex and God by Dr. Darrell Ray. So I have a personal example of this. Back in 2012, we hosted a German exchange student. And since he was 15, turning 16 when he was coming out to visit us, I decided that I better talk to his mom about sex. I knew it was different in Europe, but wow, it is so great. She was very open about it, and this is an exact. I lifted this right from the email that she sent me, and of course I redacted the student's name. She says, I have no special imagination about M and what will happen with the opposite sex. I think he's a quiet, normal boy of soon 16 years. And remember, English is not her first language. So it sounds kind of strange. And until now, he is an extreme, reasonable boy. Till now, he didn't have a girlfriend. And not the reason you think, because he didn't have time. So the part that I just think is so lovely is she says, so if he finds a girl and thinks she is cute, why not? Let him have some fun. I think he would go out with her, meet her to do activities together, and give kisses. He also knows what can happen if couples don't use a condom. I don't know if he will do it for the first time in America, but in Germany, young people with 16 years begin to do it. I, can you imagine those of us who were raised in that puritanical culture, if our parents would have said this to us, if this would have been their their take on sex as a teenager? And he was very like when he came, because she said this about the condom, I'm like, I don't know if you can buy condoms. I have no idea. My tubes are tied, but if you want me to buy them, I'll buy them. Just let me know. And he's like, no, I'm set. I brought some. Okay, well, if you run out, let me know. Um, but it just reading this again just brought tears to my eyes, because I can't imagine how different the trajectory of my life would have been if this would have been my parents' point of view and the religion I was raised in point of view. If this was their approach to sex, I would have had you probably wouldn't even know me. I wouldn't even be an RFR. But
we would miss you.
You wouldn't even know I exist. But anyway, I just went down like this fantasy when I read this. And I think we should all, hopefully, people who are raising their children now have this same point of view. I hope so. I know some of my friends who have young adult children, and that this is their point of view. So I'm I'm hopeful for the future. So this, in contrast, was what we were taught. We need to stay chaste while dating. And I think that this is an exact quote from that stupid book. Avoid circumstances that would lead to temptation, such as being alone in a house, in an apartment, or a parked automobile. It's like really specific. Like in a house, not in a car, not in an apartment, not in a condo, not in a townhome. Like, what the fuck? You have to be so specific. And then, of course, you need to dress modestly, don't give mixed signals, ask to be taken home if you feel your chastity is in jeopardy. This was written in friggin' 1989, not 1959. So dating as a Jehovah's Witness is totally fraught with landmines. this is just a small sampling of the rules that we had to observe. There was, does anybody outside of religion use the word petting or heavy petting? That's just the most ridiculous term. I come to understand that that means foreplay, but no heavy petting. So since I'm an inherent rule follower and the stakes were really high because during this time period, um, if you engage in premarital sex, it's for sure disfellowshipment and disfellowshipment. For sure, you will be disfellowshipped. And so my entire life was my friends and family. And so the stakes were so high, I couldn't risk it. So some of the things for those of you who are looking is to keep an early curfew, date in groups, or have a chaperone. Now, all of us know that you don't show your true self when you're in a group. That's when you put your mask up. It's when you're alone with somebody that you get to see who they truly are. Of course, that is not something that the governing body considers. Don't trust yourself and refrain from long good nights. Excuse me. um, it's almost impossible to orchestrate this whole have a chaperone thing because, I mean, who are you supposed to get somebody who has high morals, time to hang out with you and your boyfriend or girlfriend, and is willing to go with you wherever you want to go? It's doesn't work. um, so I know that I was not the one who paid for sex. So I went online to Reddit and I went to this question: why do witnesses get married so young and so fast? And the big old answer was, wait for it, sex. And there was a few quotes from some former witnesses, and one of them was that I don't know if it's a he or she. I was married for 3.5 years because of it. I even got baptized for fuck's sake, and it completely devastated my perception of dating for further 2 to 3 years. So a temporary horny session took my early 20s away. And then another person in answer said, absolutely to have sex. Then they find out they're not sexually compatible. So bring on the porn, the extramarital affairs, and then disfellowshipping. And another person, I didn't look this up. I just think that it's a nice anecdote. He or she said, it's why Jehovah's Witnesses have one of the worst divorce rates of any religious denomination. And this person even said, including atheists, like atheists have a really high divorce rate, which I think, I mean, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that atheists have a pretty low divorce rate. Maybe somebody can look that up. So I was constantly bumping up against my natural desire to have sex and these stupid rules. And I was completely unprepared for how powerful a human sex drive could be. And so I felt like I was in this impossible situation. I wasn't allowed to have sex until I was married. So I did what any young person would do who is horny and inexperienced. I decided I needed married so I wouldn't sin. So most of us know that the part of our brain that helps us make decisions and is responsible for impulse control and inhibiting rash behavior is not fully formed until around age 25. And keep in mind, I was like 18. So my foolproof criteria in deciding on a marriage partner was how good he smelled and his big brown eyes. And as you can guess, it didn't work out so well. Let me go back to the last slide. So it was not going to be a relationship that would last under any circumstances. We were so young. He was like maybe I think a year older than me. So nothing. Um, we came from two different cultures, two different religions, different sets of values, different upbringings. My expectation of a marriage was supposed to look pretty much like my parents. It wasn't great, but my father was very selfless. He was a very hard worker. He was a family man. He never once went out after work or went with his friends or whomever, his cousins on the weekend. Um, but I chose to marry somebody whose father died from complications of alcoholism when he was 5. He was raised by his mom and aunts and uncles and cousins. And he only went to 6th grade because he just didn't want to go to school anymore. And they were like, okay, fine. He was so coddled, which brings me to a little bit of background about my family life outside of the religion. I don't know if this is part of it or if it's just my mom, but I have like I mentioned before, I have a brother who is 5 years younger than me, and he was definitely the golden child. I was spanked a lot to the point of bruising. And I'm pretty sure they were pretty small infractions because number one, I'm an inherent rule follower. Number two, I was an extreme approval seeker. So I'm pretty sure that these were just minor mistakes and I wasn't being malicious. I'm not trying to minimize the fact that my parents chose to abuse me, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what type of a kid I was, which makes it even worse the way I was treated. So my brother was never ever spanked. He was never ever received any kind of corporal punishment. And so I asked my mom this one time, why doesn't my brother ever get spanked? And she's, oh no, he only needs a stern warning and then he obeys us. Which I'm quite sure if they just would have tried that on me, then maybe I wouldn't need to be beat. But anyway, um, so not only were these punishments really inequitable, but he was afforded a lot of advantages that I wasn't, like music lessons. Um, Most witnesses are living paycheck to paycheck, but my mom very happily paid for music lessons since he was very young. I was never offered any music lessons, even though I wanted to play the clarinet. I got nothing. And she spent thousands and thousands of dollars. I know I sound like I'm complaining, but this is giving you a little bit of background on one of the reasons why I chose to get married so young. So I was one of those rare kids who wanted to be homeschooled. When I was in junior high, I used to pray, or before I entered junior high, I used to pray for Armageddon to come so that I wouldn't have to go to school and be subjected to the ostracism, the bullying. When I was in school, so I'm a Gen Xer, so there was I don't know what school is like now, but we had 5 basic groups, and what's on the screen right now is a very bad picture of The Breakfast Club, which was a coming of age movie in 1985. And there were basically 5 groups of people. There were the jocks who were obviously athletic. There were the what we called preps, but in the movie she's called a little princess. It was usually the people who were fairly wealthy and popular. And then there were the nerds, which self-explanatory. And then there were the stoners or the delinquents. And then there was the misfits. She's called the basket case. It's Ali Sheedy who plays it in the movie. And all the first 4, they had like a certain look and a certain way of being, and you were in the clique. The misfits, not so much. But they were proud to be misfits. They were proud not to fit in. It was cool to them. And I did not think it was cool at all not to fit in because witnesses aren't supposed to be any part of the world. But if these are your only choices in school, and in order to get along in school, you really need to find your tribe, and that wasn't possible. So there was not only that, but a lot of what I consider sexual harassment now. There was all this bra snapping and depancing and goosing and butt pinching, and it would nobody ever said anything, and I was very conflict avoidant, and I thought that it was just something that I had to endure. So between the bullying and between the sexual harassment, it was, oh my God, junior high school was a very traumatizing experience for me. So anyway, when I turned 15, I was finally able to be homeschooled. And that's the reason why I had to wait, is because the price for correspondence courses went from like $100 a month down to 30. And so I managed to actually graduate within 2 years. I completed a 4-year education in 2 years. Didn't learn anything, but I didn't have to be subjected to that abuse. However, my brother immediately got to start correspondence course even before he reached junior high school, and he got to go to college prep classes, which are called something else, AP classes, I think now. Anyway, he got to go to college prep classes, which, as you recall, witnesses aren't supposed to go to college or university. He's a special case, apparently. And on top of that, I when I turned 18, I asked my dad if there could be like maybe some lightening of restrictions. Could there be any changes now that I'm legally an adult? And he said, yeah, you can start paying rent. And so I got to start paying rent. And I was out of the house by the time my brother was turned 18. But I can almost guarantee you that boy did not have to pay rent. I had to buy my own car. He was gifted a car by my parents. And he even managed to graduate with a BS in journalism, I think like in 2003. So, needless to say, I resented my parents for the unfair treatment. So, not only was there physical abuse, but since there was such a disparity in the way I was treated in comparison to my brother, I just had a really hard time believing that my parents even loved me. And that's outside of the religion. So I was dealing with these two things. I had this really strong sex drive. I really wanted to have sex. I couldn't until I was married. And then I wanted a little bit of autonomy. I wanted a relief from the restrictions and to be away from the, the mistreatment that I was experiencing. So 20 days after I turned 20, I got married. And so I thought that once you get married, you're good as gold. You've made it to marriage without even having to have experienced the horribleness of premarital sex, and that dirty, awful, immoral, disgusting act. If you after you sign that piece of paper, it becomes this beautiful, loving, glorious, fulfilling, mutually bonding experience. Well, it turned out that my husband was not actually a virgin when we got married. And so on our wedding night, he gave me HPV and chlamydia. And at the time, I've learned recently that HPV is incredibly common. Almost every single human being on earth who has ever had sexual relations will probably get HPV. The only difference in my case was that it was one of the strains that could has a strong probability of causing cervical cancer. I was diagnosed with what they call cervical dysplasia, which has the cancerous cells. And so they attempted a cone biopsy, and I started to pass out, so they had to abort the mission. But apparently, I have a really strong immune system, and I was able to fight it off. And so all of my PAPs since then have been clean. They've been negative. So anyway, that was somebody who had never had sex before, going into Planned Parenthood with not only these two diseases, but I also had like a vaginal tears, and I had just like a generalized vaginal infection. So it was so traumatizing. I did actually attempt to go to Planned Parenthood like a week or two before I got married, because I was terrified of getting pregnant, and so I wanted to get on birth control pills, but it was too late to do that because hormonal birth control pills, or the patch, or what, I don't even know if they had the patch back then. But anyway, you have to wait until your last cycle, the beginning of your last cycle or something like that. Anyway, we had to use condoms, and we had no idea how to like remove a condom safely so that you can minimize the possibility of infection. It was probably a foregone conclusion that I was going to get these diseases from him. The chlamydia, which the whole reason I got married is so I could have sex, and the treatment for chlamydia is not having sex for a week. That was so frustrating. So anyway, I thought that since I was a virgin when I got married, I was free from all of the what we used to call STDs, or now they're STIs. And um, I thought, well, I had been told that the only people who are at risk of getting HIV/AIDS are homosexuals. And the only people who ever get syphilis or gonorrhea are prostitutes. So I'm good. I'm good to go. I'm not going to get any STIs. The only reason why I need to use any kind of barriers for birth control. I was wrong. So within marriage, you're not completely free to have any type of sexual relations with when you're a witness. Um, they decided that it is sinful. They've always felt that it's sinful to have oral sex, anal sex, or fondle another person's genitals in a sexual way. Um, and the only reason why those things are off the table is because they believe that only PIV sex is the only type of sex that is allowable, because the other types of sex are characteristics of being a homosexual. So it was determined that in 1974, it was a disfellowshipping offense. And then in 1978, they decided it's no longer a disfellowshipping offense. And then in 1983, it's back being a disfellowshipping offense. And then in 2011 to now, maybe not, I don't know. Um,
But
so
what
you're
is their stated justification for these changes? Did God change his mind and tell them?
good question. Um, I don't know. I did read some of the articles, and I do not remember. They always sugarcoat it and say something that um, is similar to our new understanding. They call it new light. This is our new understanding, but I don't know. I don't know why it is or it isn't. I'm beginning to believe through my investigation and reading so many articles with among the articles in the publications that the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society writes, is that it's kind of like going along with whatever is the thought of the time, whatever the culture is of the time. Maybe some of you don't know, but witness men are now allowed to have beards. They weren't allowed for many years. One, because the second um, president of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, um, Judge Rutherford, hated beards. And so he decided that no one was allowed to have a beard. And then it was kind of renewed in the 60s when the hippie movement was going on, because that was attributed to somebody who was like rebellious, engaged in free love. And Now, for whatever reason, I think there's lots of beliefs among the ExJW's why they've decided to lighten those rules. That, along with women are allowed to wear trousers or pants, um, it's things are changing, but I have no idea why this has gone. They've flip flopped around. Um, One thing I wanted to mention that maybe people are asking is how the heck would anybody know what you're doing in your bed in your house between you and your partner? And remember what that Medium article said about you learn to police yourself and others. So you pretty much are obligated to turn yourself in if you don't follow the rules. And it one would like to believe that it's kind of like the Catholic confessional where you go and it's somewhat anonymous. But no, you get to sit in a very well lit room in front of 2 to 3 men and explain to them how you have violated the rules in your marriage by engaging in oral, anal, or touching somebody's genital, which just like at this stage in my life, I'm like, really? You think that's bad? Oh my God, it's consensual. What are you so up in arms about? Um,
I mean, like, do you have to
so,
wear mittens or something? Like, what? How do you avoid
don't
it?
touch. Do not touch. You'd think that they'd start making them wear magic underwear like Mormons, but it's so it's kind of like just missionary uh position type sex, and they did move away from it's only to have babies. I mean, that's the only reason why you need to have sex, mainly because they kept on saying that the end was near and that there is a scripture in Revelation that says, woe is the pregnant woman uh, and the woman with the suckling child when the end comes. So the end was
Wow.
supposed to come in 1975, and they even had articles, and they had um, talks at the convention basically saying that they are foretelling the end of this system of things in 1975. And so they kind of got away from making babies for for um, for quite some time, because they wanted people to dedicate their lives to Jehovah and engage in the witnessing work and not have any distractions.
Is there any data on the population of Jehovah's Witnesses declining significantly during that time?
They really cook the books. Um, they have a yearbook that is supposed to have all of these all of this data, and it is going down, but not as much as they say. I mean, it looks, if you look at the numbers year to year, it is going down slightly, but not nearly as much as it's really going down, because I've seen, I'm part of lots of ExJW sites, and they have
Well, yeah, the
pictures.
internet may be doing all that, but I meant specifically in the time frame when they were saying if you're pregnant when the end time comes, and it's coming soon, you're screwed, so don't have babies. I'm wondering if there was a huge dip right then.
No, in fact, it went up back then.
So people
Um,
did not listen to that. Okay.
no, they brought in recruits. They were bringing in people. It
Ah, they
wasn't
weren't having babies, but
now.
they're
Now
bringing
they
in
are
recruits.
depending
Okay.
on the
Because they
children
were
to get
spending more
baptized.
time instead of having babies, they were out knocking on doors.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, they had a huge influx. I think it was 70s and 80s when it was President Noor. He kind of like built up a, it was like a business to him. He used a business model, and they were bringing in witnesses hand over fist. It was amazing. Like if you would see year over year in the 70s and 80s, it was amazing the amount of witnesses that they were bringing, especially the 70s. Um, there's some factors involved with that. I believe that one thing was all of the social unrest, the civil rights movement, and I realized that was in the 60s. The civil rights movement, the women's lib, I think it's called women's rights. Um, And people were kind of at a crossroads. They didn't want the 1950s lifestyle and the white picket fence. They were looking for a change. The Vietnam War also had an impact on it. These are all just coming from me, like things that I've read or things that I've heard. But there was a huge influx of people being recruited into being a witness during that time period. Okay, 1, 2. So, 5 years into my marriage, I realized that I married an abusive addict that was in the family business of bringing drugs in from Mexico. And this was back when marijuana was still illegal in Colorado. So it took me that long because I was so naive, so ignorant, so sheltered. I never saw any of the signs. He was using cocaine. I saw no signs. I had no clue what that scale was in our garage, what it was for. It was to divide up the marijuana into little baggies to distribute. I found out later. So even though the police were called a few times by me, a few times by our neighbors because of domestic violence, so the governing body clearly states that the only reason why you're allowed to get a divorce, regardless of your safety, regardless of getting legal protection, is there has to be some kind of what they call fornication or adultery. And since that was not the case for me, it was more dangerous, and it was dangerous to me physically. And I mean, if you're, I, I did not sign up for the mafia. I did not sign up to be in a drug running family. He was considered what they call a mule. So he would bring the drugs in, and then his cousins would do the distribution. Great. Um, so I knew when I got divorced from him that I'd want to get married again. Not at the time, but maybe someday I would, and I'd never be free. I'd be perpetually married to him, because the only basis for divorce is sexual immorality. So the issue of sex is back on the table. And that's what led to my disfellowshipping, essentially, is I long it was long after my divorce was final, I decided that I wanted to have sex now. It was the most liberating experience to have sex with somebody with whom I wasn't married. I wasn't in love with him. I wasn't even in a committed relationship with him. So I wasn't obligated to marry him. I could even go have consensual sex with somebody else, which I did. It was so freeing. And I didn't feel all those things that they said I was going to feel, that I was going to feel dirty and sinful and wrong and immoral and cheap and disappointed and disgusted. It was lies. It was all lies. It was so beautiful. Oh my gosh. Um, it was just two mutually consenting adults having safe sex. That's all it was. And I had to wait so long for that. So I spent the next like 2 decades pretty much until I hit menopause. That's another story. Having really great active, I had a great active sex life. I had some with men that I wasn't married to, and then I eventually ended up marrying somebody that I love. He smells good too, but I love him, and that's the reason why I married him. And I really feel like the first marriage is kind of like a dry run, just a it's practice marriage. And the second one, especially if you get married as young as I did, the second marriage was we were experienced and a little bit more experienced in life, and I knew he was a keeper. It was obvious. So then I spent the rest of these basically 2 decades from the time I was 30 to 50, um, educating myself about sex. I have up on the screen the book. Um, an image of the book, The Valley of the Horses, which I know is an incredibly old book, but I was banned from reading it because it has these really explicit sex scenes. So, at the ripe old age of 35, I went back and read it. It was great. I read books like Sex at Dawn, Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Sex But Were Afraid to Ask. I consumed the Outlander books because they have great sex scenes. And I asked my husband, how do you get free porn online? He showed me. And I got really interested in Masters of Sex. There are two individuals who really studied sex, and the nobody really felt that women enjoyed sex. And I might be a little bit wrong about this. There could have been some studies beforehand, but these were the most well-known stories or studies about orgasms and what the body goes through as it's experiencing an orgasm. Anyway, I just like caught up on all of the things that I had lost out on. I had like a half a foot worth of like porn materials. I eventually had to throw it away because it was so thumb through. It was just like it was disintegrating, and none of them, the little magazines were not sticking together, and they were all just like loose leaf. And then the internet was popular, and I could go on Pornhub. So what do I need that for? So according, the really disappointing thing is in my local library, I live in suburbia America, is their romance section is just like really big on romance and really slim on sex. Anyway, that was my only disappointment. And we went to sex shops, and we got toys, and we did all the things that are normal. And I didn't feel guilty ever, and I enjoyed myself. Actually, my interest in sex was the reason why I am part of RfR, because I was trying to catch up on everything that I had ever lost out on in life once I woke up from the religion. And I discovered the podcast called Secular Sexuality with Dr. Daryl Ray. And so I just like binge listened to every single episode. And even though I had been educating myself or experimenting, it was always within this really vanilla heterosexual context. So I had never even heard the word polyamory until I listened to his podcast, and my ideas on BDSM and kink were like way off. So I heard him talk about RfR because it was just in its infancy. And then I went and I attended, this was pre-pandemic, I attended an in-person support group meeting, and the rest is history. I started volunteering in 2017, but I want to, that might sound, it might sound like it was free sailing after I was disfellowshipped and after I was, I guess, liberated sexually. But the first time I watched Dr. Ray's talk on sex and God, I was right back in that seventh grade classroom. I was staring at the floor, and I'm like, oh my God, it's another penis. He's going to stop showing the penises. It was so like those, being educated like that in a room full of other human beings, what made me feel like I was back in my class, in that classroom. But I didn't stare at the floor. I did look up at each one of those slides as long as he had them up there. And I listened to his talk 2 more times, and it got better. It got much better. um, I'm pretty sure that I'm always going to be recovering from religion. I'm always going to be recovering from the damage that the cult caused. But I'd much rather be in recovery than be in that repressive, misogynistic life that I was in, and trying to follow their unrealistic rules that are just like, they're contrary to biology. So that's my
Well,
story.
we are so glad you're here. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And that was an amazing journey. You've gone from being embarrassed to see the penises on the slide to sharing with us about sex education and how to find ethical porn. So I love
Yes.
that. I love that for us.
See,
And
now you made me
thank
blush
you.
again.
I love it. I love it. No, you're among friends. And thank you so much for sharing that. That was incredible. And we are having a lot of people in the chat who are very glad that you shared and thanking you for all of your candor and your insights and your story. So I'm so glad you
Thank
came.
you.
Thank you for coming. And I will put all of these links in the chat so people can look up any of those books and other links that you mentioned to us. And I think we do have a few question time for a few questions, and there may be some other topics we can get into in the hangout as well if you're able to stick around. But
I
I
am.
say we do some questions. Let's see here. Rob, would you like to start us off with a question?
Yeah, I'm always interested in the, what's it called, eschatology one. So someone asked, what's Armageddon in reference to Jehovah's Witnesses? What is Armageddon in the doctrine?
It's the final war where the basic, I mean, there's a little bit more steps involved, but for in the interest of time, it's basically when Jehovah kills all of the people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses, and then all of the Jehovah's Witnesses get to meet a paradise earth. I mean, there's some more fighting, infighting, basically, and then there's what they call the cry of peace and security, and then like the politicians, the religions, they it's kind of like they start fighting amongst themselves. And then as soon as they notice, hey, there's all these, 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses just standing here waiting around trying to figure out what you two are who's gonna win, then Jehovah steps in and he protects his people and kills all the rest of the people. And we have very vivid pictures of that. It's great.
And then, as I understand it, people who came and knocked on my door and were not successful in converting me, if they liked my house, they might decide to move in because I won't be here anymore, right?
Good point. Yeah. Yeah, they do this thing where they dust off their shoes. And then oftentimes, if we were going door to door in a very affluent area, we would talk about taking your house after Armageddon, which
Right.
I really don't.
So isn't that a conflict of interest? Why would they really try hard to convince the person in a nice mansion that they want?
Good point.
I mean,
It
in the
doesn't even
crappy
make any
houses,
sense
okay,
because
you
the
try to
earth is
bring them into the
destroyed.
fold. But if you want that mansion, no, forget it. Goodbye. I'm not going to tell you anything about JW.
Good point. That's a very good point. Yeah. Logic does not enter into it.
That's fair. Okay, so I've got another kind of fun question. Not that Armageddon was a fun question,
I
but
was saying,
we
what?
ended on a fun note
Another
after that
fun
question.
question. We all get wiped out except for a few thousand. That's
Yeah, that's anyway. Moving on. Um, someone is wondering, since your T conversion, what is now your favorite holiday?
I'm really lame at celebrating holidays, probably because there's no children. Like Christmas would probably be a lot of fun. But I'm sorry, I have no favorite holidays. The Independence Day scares my dog. Um, I, I don't get behind Easter. Every Easter weekend is the American Atheist Convention, and I just started going, and I'm keeping it up. I don't have
Yay.
any favorite holidays. Halloween, you would think would be a good one. I hate dressing up, and I think it's not those kids coming to my door begging for treats. I
and
don't.
now
I
nowadays
don't.
nowadays it's not those kids probably carrying COVID or something. But
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm very disappointed. It's a very disappointing answer. I don't have any favorite
So
holidays.
I have a tangential question to that. Maybe a follow-up, I'll say. Yeah, so most people I know, including myself, grew up Christian, not Jehovah's Witnesses. And so they had a Christmas tree and whatever, and Santa Claus. And when they don't believe anymore, they still put a tree up and do it. So, but Jehovah's Witnesses didn't start out that way. So, is there any feeling like, hey, I want to join in this American holiday, or not at all? Because you didn't originally.
We have a Christmas tree. We put it up. We have lights.
Ah, so you
But
do
I
that.
just,
Okay.
I think it's just it's like a piece of junk in the corner. I hate it when a Christmas tree is up. And we spent a lot of money on a pre-lit Christmas tree, but it was mainly for my husband. I just none of that stuff is exciting to me. I kind of like to celebrate my birthday, um, but even I mean, if somebody's not like throwing you a birthday party, it's kind of lame. Like we just go out to eat. Big whoop. Sorry. Maybe I should work on that. I'm going to think more about that. I've got to find a holiday I like.
You know, I really like Mondays because we have RfRx and get to hang out with cool people, and it feels like a fun holiday every week.
Okay. Yeah, and it's every week. I don't have to wait once a year.
Exactly.
Yeah, my
So that's a
family,
valid
my
choice.
husband's family is from Mexico, and they know how to celebrate birthdays really well. They threw me a surprise birthday party, and the chorus from the Catholic Church came and sang the entire birthday song in Spanish, which is much, much longer than the American one. Very long.
I love that.
So I have another Christmas follow-up. I'm always curious about this holiday specifically. So I understand sort of like, you're not important yourself, only Jehovah is important. So don't celebrate any like personal holidays or whatever national holidays. But why not Christmas? Like it's supposedly the birth of Jesus. So why is that one off the plate?
It's a
Originally, the
birthday.
witnesses did celebrate it. Um,
Oh, wait, I'm
so
sorry. You said they originally did?
yeah, they did. They even allowed, spoiler alert, smoking is not allowed, but they used to allow smoking. And there's actual pictures of Christmas trees at their headquarters but it's black and white, so I don't know. It's like it was a long time ago. Um, so my understanding is that it is incumbent upon them to celebrate Jesus' death, which is just stupid. Not his resurrection, his death. There is one scripture about death being more important than birth. But I believe that the real reason is that they are really hung up on separating themselves from the rest of Christianity. That's one of the reasons why they don't do blood transfusions. It's not to kill off martyrs. It's mainly because they want to set themselves apart from the rest of Christianity.
Interesting.
That is interesting. And that reminded me that we should share the poll results from
Oh,
earlier
yeah.
in the show. Let me do that, and then we can start wrapping up after that. But let's see. So the questions that we asked were, why did you get married the first time, if there was more than one time? And 35% of people selected for love. Oh, that's nice. 10% selected for sex, 2% for money, 4% for your parents, 2% for guilt, and 47% said none of the above. Wow,
What
what
did
were
we
the other
miss
Wow,
that?
what were the
reasons?
Wow.
others?
What option did we miss that was so popular?
Yeah.
I said that
Wow.
good government insurance.
Oh.
It may be.
Oh, also foolishly, we forgot to include on this one never been married.
Yeah.
That
Oh,
Right.
that was
yeah.
probably
Sorry.
a big chunk.
Yes,
That should
yes.
be it. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Fair enough. And I try to be so careful to include all like choices to include everyone, and that was a real obvious one I missed there. Sorry about that, y'all. We did include that in the second question,
Yes.
which is if you have been married, how old were you when you married for the first time? And 2% of people selected younger than 19, 8% 19 to 20, 20% were 21 to 23. That was our biggest chunk. 8% were 24 to 26, 8% were 27 to 29, and 12% were 30 or over. And we did have 41% who had never been married. So that did account for most, but not all of the people who selected none of the above in the previous question. So I guess insurance was the other reason we missed. And then we had, this was the quiz question, and you can tell us the answers on this one, Shana. Which of these are against the rules for JWs? We had 74% of people selected smoking, and you could pick more than one answer on this, so it adds up to more than 100. 26% selected eating pork. 91% identified receiving a blood transfusion. You did mention that. 32% drinking coffee or tea, and 64% registering to vote. So which of these are forbidden?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was afraid of that witnesses are most known for not receiving blood transfusions, but most everybody got that one. So smoking is not allowed, including marijuana. And so I purposefully looked for other high control groups. And so I got the eating pork from, I know Muslims don't either, but I looked at Seventh-day Adventists. Witnesses are allowed to eat any kind of meat they choose, as long as it doesn't have blood, which doesn't all meat have blood? The drinking coffee or tea, we're always confused with Mormons about that. So yeah, witnesses can have coffee, tea. They can even drink alcohol, just not within excess, not in excess. And that's interesting that not as many people as I thought didn't know that witnesses couldn't vote. So interesting.
So the ones that were correct were smoking, the blood transfusion, and registering to vote, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Huh. I didn't know that about.
So those were the highest ones by quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So most people are very well informed.
Yeah.
I just
All right.
assumed it was all of them, so I was one of the wrong people about eating pork and drinking coffee or tea.
Okay, so our final question was, which character were you in The Breakfast Club? And the highest percentages, 20% picked Molly Ringwald and 20% said Anthony Michael Hall. All of the other choices had about 4%, except for Mr. Vernon. He only got 2%, Paul Gleason. And 44% selected What the Hell is the Breakfast Club? Or might have selected that one just because they didn't identify with a character. But wow, that was a high percentage, y'all. Tough crowd with these pop culture questions, really? Folks.
I think that tells me the demographics because it's a total Gen X film. So if you were a Gen Xer, then you probably aren't familiar with it.
Fair enough. Okay, well, that was fun. And I loved learning about this. Thank you so much for sharing. And we are going to wrap up now so we can go to the hangout. Shana, are you going to be able to stick around with us for the hangout or? Yay. Yes. Okay, so if we didn't get to someone's question, ask us in the hangout. Okay, so let's move on. We're going to wrap up here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and being here for the show, as well as thank you, everybody, all of our volunteers who make it happen every single week, and to our speaker, who is the most important part of it. And Rob, do you want to tell us what we're going to be doing in the upcoming weeks?
Yes, let's see. Who is up next week? Oh, it's me.
Oh,
I'm going to give a talk
Rob.
that I have titled, Are Humans Special in the Universe? You can figure out what that might mean. Then the next week is John Lovell. I don't know who that is. You, Cara?
The Skeptic.
Is that a podcaster?
I believe so.
Okay. And don't know what the topic is. It wasn't listed. Do we have any more information on that?
No.
Okay. And the following week, we do have information. It is Autumn Sword going to be talking about the Satanic Panic, one of my favorite topics.
Excellent. Okay, so some good episodes coming up. Next week, you get to hear Rob. We've been advertising Rob's episode for a while now, so I'm excited. The bar is high. Okay.
And I haven't done it yet, so I have less than a week.
Hurry, cram. Okay. What else can people do? Well, let me tell you, if you want to find us on the social medias and see what all is going on in the RFR world, we are online. We're on Facebook. We have a main page as well as a Facebook support group page, and I'm dropping the links in the chat. We're on X. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, and of course, we are on YouTube. You can find 199 previous episodes of RfRx on YouTube. So I guess next week, probably the 200th one will drop. We have had 200 episodes already, but that's just the amount that are on YouTube. So look forward to that. And Rob, what if people want to get more involved than just watching?
Wow, then they can volunteer with us. And as Helen has said, you will be, what is the number we figured out scientifically now? 20.52%, something like that?
I think it's
More
something like
cool.
that. A little
Yes.
more than 20% cooler.
Cooler, yes. So if you volunteer for us, you will be doing yourself a favor too, because we've learned that healing can come from helping others. We find meaning and purpose by volunteering here. And all of our services that we talked about extensively before are supported by our staff of volunteers. So we're always in need of new people. And the thing that's, most obvious that we do is our helpline, well, in the show, but the helpline is talked about a lot on other podcasts and YouTube shows. But we do need people for a lot of things. If you're not, up to being face to face or on the phone with someone, directly, that's too intimidating. That's fine. We need people to find and vet and post the resources that the agents give to other people. We need people to support those online groups that we talked about in Slack. We need people who maybe want to actually work Zoom meetings like this with the support groups. That would be great. Support group leaders or co-leaders. We even need people to do IT work, and we need a lot of that. So to volunteer, fill out the form on our main page and click right at the top where it says volunteer, and you'll have to read something so you understand what's involved, and then you can click in and fill out an application. And we still have a note. We're still looking for web developers and also volunteer trainers and support group leaders.
All right. Well, yeah, please join us if you are so inclined. And now to wrap us up, let's hear a few words from the lovely and amazing Executive Director, Gail Jordan. Gail, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Kara. Thank you, everybody, for attending. You hear these things about religions that are not in your wellhouse, and you just think, I'm sure that's an exaggeration. I'm sure that's not really how it works. And then you hear a talk like Shana has shared with us tonight, and you just think, how do we do this? How do we fall into this? And it's, we start as children, and it'll bring me to tears to talk about it. I could see 11-year-old Shana. I want to do this thing. I want to be baptized. I want to live this life. And I just want to scoop her up and pull her out of it. And so many of us, my own daughter's in here. I want to go back and scoop her up and take her out of it. And as we reassemble then again, years after the fallout of the damage of religion, and then we find our joy. We go through it and we endure it and we try so hard to conform. And then we work through the fracture and the deconstruction. And then we come full cycle, and there is so much more light and air and space on this side, wherever you are on your journey. If this has spoken to you, know that there is light on the other side. There's joy on the other side. Become part of Recovering from Religion. We'd love to do the journey with you. We'd love to share our experiences. Our clients would share their experiences. Coming up in September, we have our fantastic, fabulous weekend religion recovery retreat. And if you don't think that sounds like a good time, it's because you haven't been. There are so many different ways that we can go along in our journey and bond with one another and hear one another's stories and come out the other side and not just exist, but thrive. Shana's a perfect example of it. I got to spend a weekend with her in her home in Colorado not long ago, and I can tell you that she is full of joy. She may not like snot-nosed trick-or-treaters, but she is a very joyful person, and the hard work that she does at Recovering from Religion, it just makes me so proud to know that she is my friend, and I'm so deeply grateful. And I say this every time we have a speaker that shares from such a personal perspective. Shana, this could not have been easy. These things that could not have been easy. You did a great job and you're composed, and we've all learned from it. And at the same time, these were real experiences that you had. These were real feelings. And I so appreciate you being so authentic and so willing to share with the rest of us. Enjoy the hangout, guys. Thank you again for coming. If you have any questions about everything, our wonderful hosts have covered it all. Find us on the web, find us in our social media, and become part of our team. Thanks, everybody.